right. I imagine most of you people do stuff on the front end. Just raise your hand. That's a nice set of hands. And most of you also do stuff on the mobile web, right? Now, who of you think that whole experience could be a lot better? Now, keep your hands up. I'm going to take a picture. All right. You'll find yourselves on Twitter later. Like Brian said, I'm Horia Dragomir. I work for Wuga. We make social games. And we also dabbled in HTML5 for social games on mobile devices. That's my Twitter username. You can stalk me. My phone will ring if you tweet at me. Don't. So let's get right into it. This guy said, games lubrify the mind and the body. And he was right. And everybody knows that now, and everybody is adding gamification to their app, whether it be badges, whether it be achievements, or what have you. Because it makes sense and makes people more involved with your whatever you're building, a game or an app. And we've seen an explosion of games recently, a lot of social games as well, because for some reason they make a lot of money and they make a lot of people happy as well. So you want to build a game. But if you do want to build a game, you should start with an idea at first, and then figure out what the best technology is for you to build that game in. And if you choose HTML5, you're going to have some problems. But that's all right. That's all right. We'll go through some of them. This is a warm-up. This is what you normally get when you load a web page in Safari. You all know this. And you all know that you want to get to this state, where you have most of the screen. This is before you install the app as a bookmark or before you wrap it in PhoneGap. This is just what you get. And the easiest way to fix this is this. It's a very straightforward solution. And maybe someday you'll get a nice API natively in the browser that says, I want you to remove your ugly bar. But for now, this is what you have to do. This is the most recurring problem, and you all know this. I mean, Simon just talked about it as well. You have speed, and there are very many aspects of speed that you have to tackle. You have execution speed, you have loading speed, and you have general responsiveness of the app. You have texture, and sometimes an HTML5 app feels like an HTML5 app. And you can fix that. You can make it feel a lot better. Not native, because that's not what you try to be, just better and good. And as a rule of thumb, between these two big platforms, Apple is faster, a lot. The iPhone 5 just got announced. You can pre-order it today, yay. And that's going to be a lot faster. For some reason, it can draw, it can animate a lot more than Android devices. DOM elements, a lot more, and things on canvas, a lot more. For some reason, Android, although it has come a long way since, say, a year ago, its canvas thing is not up to par with the rest of the platform. And Android developers in this room will know that it's not always a pleasure. So you have to cater for both platforms and try to make your app feel good on both platforms, and especially with a game, because, well, games need to be invisible. You need to get the player immersed. The other problem you're going to have is loading times, because the TCP/IP stack on these little things takes forever to spin up. So you always get like half a second of overhead over every request. So you want to keep requests down in number and in size as well. People are on 3G, people are on Edge. Yeah, we got LTE now, but we're not going to get LTE anytime soon, really, everywhere and everybody. And nobody's going to have, I mean, not everybody's going to have a phone that can use that full network potential. So you still have to rely on the old tricks from 1999 to keep things down. However, you know, Android provided a solution based on this super new technology from 2005 called pipelining. And it's also available in iOS 5. Yay. iOS 6 is coming out, but it's also available in iOS 5. And pipelining, if you don't know, it allows you to combine multiple requests. I mean, the server combines the response for multiple requests doing this with the same connection. So you skip over the overhead of creating new requests, which is cool. But this leads to headaches that we'll discuss later down. And I have a video now that will illustrate the problems with loading times on mobile devices. And that's it. And that's what users get. But even this is not that bad. Because if a user sees a spinner, even if the spinner doesn't spin, the users understand that, okay, something somewhere is happening. I'm not at fault, it's the network. I can see I'm on edge, okay, I'll get it slower. They understand that. At least they've been educated. And once you get stuff across, I have to bash app cache. You're gonna wanna keep it there. You don't wanna make the same request twice. And Jake Archibald has a great talk about application cache. It's called Application Cache is a Douchebag, and it is. You have no control over it. It tells you a minimum amount of information for what it's doing. It loads on its own. You can't tell it to load later or to load in sequences or whatever. The UI will basically freeze while it's loading, if it's loading a lot. And you can't say, hey, add this to your manifest. No, no. So what you do is you make iframes and create new manifest files on the server on the fly, and then you keep track of all of those, and it's hard. But for what it does work for, it's actually pretty good. So it is reliable. It's just a pain to work with. How you mitigate that and increase the overall responsiveness and texture of your game or your app is by golfing. Who here knows 140 bytes? That is such a cool website. Please go check it out. It makes you take a chunk of JavaScript functionality, like a polyfill for requestAnimation frame, and you have to get it down so it could fit in a tweet. And you do it by iterative strokes. You keep it smaller and smaller until it fits in a tweet. And it's called golfing. You need to do that with all of your app. You have to see what you can take away, and your game will still work, your app will still work. Essentially, what you get there across for the first time, the initial impression that you leave the user with. Is it a fast app, or is it a huge app that takes forever to load, and I might not have the patience to wait for it to load? So make sure your initial application is very small, and you can load stuff when you need to later on. You also do this with your CSS selectors, with your CSS files. You should keep your DOM as small as possible, because that will help you as well. A smaller, leaner DOM means it's easier to work with, easier to understand. You don't have extra stuff that you don't necessarily need. And it helps you to be awesome, and you should be awesome. Because I love jQuery. It has saved me pain, anguish, grief, many a times. But you don't need it on mobile. You don't. It's a lot of functionality that is already provided to you by the browser, and it's basically just syntactic sugar in the end. And it's big, and it's slow. So you don't need it. Again, I love jQuery. This is not bashing jQuery. This is just me saying you don't necessarily need it on mobile devices, because the cool new APIs that you all know and love are amazing. And this is what you mostly use jQuery for anyway, right? To get stuff. And this is a lot faster. Also, there's this method that you give it a class. It gives you all the elements with a class of a node or of the whole document if you like. And I remember when John Resig was testing jQuery's sizzle against the new native implementations of this function, he once tweeted, "Why is it so fast?" Because this is fast. It's optimized by everybody, because browser vendors know that this is what people use a lot, classes. And they optimize for all those interactions. But if you want speed, use the king of speed. This is the fastest way to get any element in your DOM. It's always has been and always will be, I think, if you want one element. And you usually do want one element because the other thing you use jQuery or big frameworks or libraries for is to handle events and their bubbling and to make sure they bubble, and they do bubble. You don't have IE6 on mobile devices. You can use bubbling, you can leverage that. That's cool. You save memory that way. You don't bind 20 million functions to 45 nodes. You can just use one as a gateway. So please use bubbling wisely. And you can use it reversely for CSS. You can toggle changes further down the tree by using one top-level change. And you should do that. Again, I love jQuery for how it put a nice coding over the whole XML/HTTP request. My only grief with XML/HTTP request is that it's not so long, is that I have to type HTTP with an uppercase H and lowercase TTP. That just feels weird. In any case, you got cross-domain requests on mobile. The full spec is supported. It is just cool. And apart from the networking problem that you have anyway, it is pretty fast and reliable. So you don't need a wrapper around it. It's straightforward now. And I'm sure you've gotten used to it by now. However, if you use application cache to keep track of all your stuff, and you use AJAX to get stuff in your app or game, sometimes if you make an AJAX request to a resource that is stored in application cache, you get the resource over just fine, and you get a response code of 0. Which, well, Pat Miller told me, oh yeah, we know about that problem. It's something browsers do when they don't know what to do. They send you 0. But you don't know, that's not in the spec. But you spend one Sunday debugging and you realize, oh, that's the problem. And that's like a very broad range to have. But it's a nice filter. Anything over 400, yeah, that's an error, then you get the error handlers. Otherwise, just let it go. Trust it. And since you're doing AJAX a lot, it might make sense to use push state. You know what push state is? Yeah, you also know you don't get it on mobile? It would be very cool to have, but we don't have it. It essentially allows you to keep track of what is supposed to change between pages or between states of the application or game inside the JavaScript object in memory, so that when the user presses back or forward, you can do whatever you want to do. That's cool. So you don't have to rely on hash change, because on hash change is old, and this is the year 2000. And you should use a request animation frame to speed up animations. Do you know what it is? See a lot of hands. It basically syncs up your drawing code, your redraws, with the browser's native redraws. The browser will do them for you when it thinks it's best, and it knows better than you do anyway. You don't get this on mobile either, and this would help a lot. It will help a lot, because this holds true on the web, on the desktop web as well. This is one of the biggest problems, but it's not that apparent on the desktop web because we have pretty good computers. On mobile, though, if you get too crazy with your DOM nodes and you cause redraws on too many of them, which is something you normally don't keep track of, unfortunately, you get to have a very sluggish app, an app that feels broken when you try to scroll it, a game that doesn't move smoothly, a character that stops and walks funny. And you want to avoid this. So one way is to keep your DOM node lean, so you don't have too many things to redraw in the first place. And the other way is to not do things yourself, because you're going to use properties that aren't necessarily that good. You can use CSS, and you can learn what properties to use to animate stuff so it feels fluid. You can use the new CSS retransforms to create very fluid, very smooth, hardware accelerated animations and nice transitions and all that. And this is what you should do on mobile. You should not really use JavaScript to animate. And you probably know this already from the desktop web. But this is very important on mobile web, because animations are hard. And to look at CSS animations, just look at what Leah Verwood does, for instance, because she does a lot of crazy stuff. And this is one way. When we moved a lot of animations from canvas in our game to DOM, we saw a big increase in speed because stuff is hardware accelerated. And you can even cheat that to get things hardware accelerated just to have them hardware accelerated so that they feel smoother, even though you're not necessarily transforming them or rotating them or whatever. They just move better, feel better, more fluid. It's something that you have to take care of because if you use too much of it, the application will, or the game will start to hang. But in general, CSS3 transforms, especially 3D transforms, are the key for very fast and fluid animations and movements inside the DOM. Also, if you're going to do complex stuff, use the matrix 3D transforms. It's not necessarily faster, but it's faster to write. It's easier to keep track of as a developer. If you get your head around the whole matrix, which is not hard, then it's just a pleasure to work with. This is one thing you should really do after the conference if you're not doing it already. Anybody using matrix transforms? There's 2 guys, 3 guys. Also, you have to take care of this guy, because this guy is a lot of people. And unfortunately, I'm sure a lot of you have Android devices, and that's cool. I like Android. How many of you have the latest OS version? It's a sizable amount, but I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys have an older version. And the newer versions are very cool, especially because they have Chrome. Older versions, not so cool because they handle transforms very poorly. They handle animations very poorly. And you're going to have to do crazy hacks. You're going to have to make sacrifices, which is, in a way, perhaps progressive enhancement or graceful degradation, but you normally don't think about that. So you have to make sure that your application looks or is usable in all platforms, but all the puff might not be there. Bouncing arrows and bouncing speech bubbles, you might have to leave them out for Android because it doesn't do well with multiple animations of multiple transforms on nested elements. Also, on Android 2.3, don't use hardware accelerated transforms because they're slower than non-hardware accelerated transforms. This is totally obvious, right? And you should know this now. It's really cool. However, let's move on from Android. I like it, yeah? Browser vendors optimized get elements by class name because people use classes a lot. And that's what you're used to. You're used to using classes. However, you can also use attributes, especially in complex apps or games, to hold stats, to hold more states of the same element. Classes are great for binary switches. Attributes are great for everything else. If a node can be in several states, use an attribute. And you can use CSS to hook into that attribute and style accordingly. You should not style with JavaScript, by the way. You know that, I'm sure. However, there are problems because vendors know you use classes, and so all of a sudden you're not using classes. They won't always redraw when you change something. Like, CSS will not follow the value of a slider input because why would I? It's not a class. So you have to tell it that, hey, you know, you should actually refresh. You should redraw. You end up having to either change the class name to what the class name was, or add an empty space to the end of the DOM to trigger a redraw on that node when you change an attribute. But, you know, that's what you do. And it is small things like this that make you go faster. And I have a question. Can anybody tell me what's wrong with this picture? I'll tell you what's wrong with this one. It has numbers in it. And that's what the phone does to your numbers. Because, oh, you have numbers you want to call. Cool. Let me link them for you and mess up your style sheet. And of course, this is what you want in your game. Fortunately, there's an easy way to fix this. It's a meta tag. It's called format detection. And it essentially tells the browser, leave me alone, I know what I'm doing. Also, you know onClick is broken, and you know how to fix it. You love these guys, yeah? This also enables you to do a lot of cool stuff, like listen for pinch to zoom stuff, so you can scroll the map, so you can enlarge an image. And a nice guy from Flickr provides you with a formula to smoothly zoom in or out of an image based on the pinch to zoom gesture. It is pretty cool stuff. And there's also Hammer.js, which is a nice wrapper over everything, and it tells you that the user swiped, the user double tapped, the user did this, the user dragged, and in this direction now, and it's a pretty cool library. Also, touch-end is a very, very interesting event because it doesn't tell you where the touch ended. You have to keep track of where it started and where it moved, and then when the end happens, you have to read your own data. It doesn't tell you, it's a jerk. Also, you can do a nice thing. You can add an empty event listener on the document for the touch end event. And that will enable the CSS active selector. And you can use a CSS active selector, which you don't natively get on mobile devices for some reason, to toggle states when the user taps a lot easier. Before I found out this hack, I would do it with JavaScript because you need instant feedback. Instant feedback is the one thing that makes your app feel more responsive, even if it's doing a lot of legwork in the background. And it's perceived responsiveness that sells an app, not how fast it truly is. Because you can lie, you can tell the user that, yeah, I have your input. This is the nice animation that's gonna keep you busy while I make this AJAX call. You have to delay your heavy JS execution, your blocking JS execution, until after you told the user that you're doing something. Otherwise, they get frustrated and they think, I didn't click in the right place. I didn't whack the right monster. And that gets them frustrated. That makes them believe it's their fault. And the one thing in games, if you're making a social game, it is never the user's fault. Hardcore games, yeah, it's always the user's fault. But with social games, people play social games to relax, to be able to think about other stuff. They don't want to think about the game too much. And that's why you don't have to make it their fault. You have to make things easy for them. And it's the same with apps. You want people empowered, not challenged. These properties, do you use them? All of them. They're great. They let you fine-tune what is interactable and what users can play with, what users can tap. What happens if they double tap? Does it select text or does it just make the screen bigger? It gives you fine-grained control over your interface. Whether it's an app, whether it's a game, it doesn't matter. People rarely use this for websites. They usually use pointer events none for websites and that's it. But all these three properties are just great. Please use them a lot. And how many of you have iPhone 4s or any device with an above average pixel device ratio? I meant density, but that's all right. If you do this, you already know you should do this, but for Retina devices, a weird thing happens when you do this. You're essentially telling it to draw 4 times the number of pixels. That's a lot of stuff this little baby has to draw. It loves it. You get a massive boost in performance. If the browser doesn't have to blow things up itself, scale things up itself to make it look good on the Retina device, and if you do it for them and then you just load bigger graphics or just use hardware transforms, 3D transforms to make things bigger, oh, the browser will love you and you gain 30 frames per second and stuff. And it doesn't make sense, does it? But nothing makes sense, and you learn by doing stuff and by trying new things. And PPK has a nice article on this. You should really read it, because it's a jungle. I mean, device pixel ratio ranges from 1 to, I think, 438, right? It's just crazy. It goes to 2 point something, but people usually just test if it's 2 or not, and it can be many other values. And if you assume it's just not Retina if it's not 2, you're going to be in trouble because you end up with a broken interface, a broken game, and a very unhappy user. And to make users happy, you have this. This is from Android. It tells you what you're on. Are you on 3G? Are you on LTE? Are you on a wired Ethernet cable? And you can make decisions based on this. You can load better graphics or not. You can stream the high quality movie, or you can stream the crappy one. In any case, this also, hey, let's not do all the tracking calls now because we'll choke up his bandwidth. This provides you with information which you need. You don't normally get this. You get this on Android and it's really, really, really cool. I like it. And you can get this with PhoneGap though. So that's cool. And I'm pretty sure you can get it on Gecko on Firefox OS when it does come out. And speaking about when it does come out in the future, you guys heard from Simon what Mark Zuckerberg said and what he meant. And that's a relief because when he gave the speech, I know the whole internet went crazy, and it's good to know that it's not bad. It's just an introspect over what they did. So looking onward, you got Firefox OS, which I'm sure will be amazing. I mean, I'm sorry, Brian, but it's like PhoneGap to the nth degree. It's like, hey, you got the whole OS. You can do whatever. And that's cool. That's what we want. We want to make cool web apps, cool games. Stuff that feels fast, stuff that interacts very well with the user and with the device as well. Stuff that knows a lot more so you can make good decisions about how to make the experience better. And if you're building web apps, I strongly suggest that you read this book. It's single-page app books. It's good, and it's a short read, fairly short read, and it provides a lot of insight on how to think about single-page apps. And the thing is, you should be reading books and trying wacky things and doing things you wouldn't expect would work, because sometimes they do, and then it pays off, because you're usually you're playing with technology that was meant for something else, and you're using it to create something that was not meant for you. You're using it in a way it wasn't meant to be used. And that means you're pushing against the boundaries of what the technology is, and that means you are moving things forward for yourself.